words, it's not the best pilot who will become captain of the vessel, but the one who looks stronger. However, as the quote says, that individual may be a bit blind, a bit deaf, and not a good pilot in the first place. So his critique of democracy, which is used today quite a bit, was that voters are not rational enough to exercise their choices correctly. Therefore, the state had to select those natures, those individuals who were the most intelligent, had the right temperament, train them, and then groom them so that they were able to assume political office in the future. So he was advocating for having what he called philosopher kings to be the rulers. Obviously, this is not very democratic because it certainly ignores the will of the people, but what he argues was that the will of the people was not rational. So his critique is very, very much useful for today to analyze democracies. Now, I'm not advocating that we have philosopher kings running our countries. However, there may be ways in which we could train voters or reduce certain amounts of information that are given to voters so that they make more rational decisions.
You said to voters. I think there is one more difference when we compare ancient Greek to the modern world. I mean, if you look at Athens, that was a village compared to cities or mega cities like New York or London or so. That time, ancient Greek people knew the candidates. Do you know Obama, Barack Obama personally? Angela Merkel, all these people? Ever had lunch with them?
Oh, not at all.
I would say most voters also would not have any chance here. So isn't this even more problematic today when voters are so far away from the politicians? Is this argument, oh, we should have philosophers? I mean, why not have an IQ test and don't let the voters vote, but have some, universities have hiring committees, no? Why shouldn't be there a committee hiring the next president who is able to judge all this? Because the voters, they can't do this job. They are too far away.
Yeah. No, you're right. Again, we cannot advocate for something that's anti-democratic. Politicians know very, very well that they are able to manipulate symbols, images. They have an army of people who are obsessed about portraying a good image, help them with their rhetorical strategies, make them seem more charismatic. So they will do anything possible to dupe voters into getting voted. And once they are voted, they will do everything possible to get re-voted. So yes, to a certain extent, there is a lot of manipulation going on and a lot of irrationality going on. And we are not going back to basics in terms of focusing on issues and discussing issues, but instead we are focusing on individuals and personas and characters who can easily influence other people. So I don't know exactly what we should do to make the political dispensation or the political system more effective. I think if we were to make some interventions, it would have to be at schools, for example. Teaching little children how they think, teaching children about decision theory and biases in decision making. Most adults don't realize how they think and how they make decisions, how they might stereotype. So if we were to do any targeted interventions, it would be in teaching children to be more scientific, to think more critically. Instead, they are taking a whole host of subjects that are not very, very useful, in my opinion. I guess more children know about biblical history than about how their mind works.
So you really think we should focus on children rather than adults? I mean, these are adults, the voters, right?
Well, I guess there could be some training that we could give to adults and perhaps also methods in which we could reduce the amount of information they get on people's faces. But again, I really think we need to inoculate voters at a young age, just like when we inoculate them against a virus. We do that at a young age. We need to do this at a young age. We don't want children to learn, for example, about sex education by watching pornography films. Same with the political education system. We need to start early and teach them explicitly about these biases. And this is very important, not just for political systems, about hiring people in jobs, about selecting people to be in positions of leadership in other situations. Facial effects or any kind of stereotypes play a big role, and not just in political elections.
So this could be one way. Focus on the voters. Help them to protect themselves against any influences coming from the politicians. Another way would be do not focus so much on the voters and educate them, but change the system so that people do not vote on people, but on issues. Take, for instance, Switzerland. We are here in Switzerland. It's a confederation. Highly developed discussion culture. And, of course, people vote parliament, presidents, all that, but they also vote on a lot of issues. They vote on the health insurance system, on whether smoking should be banned in public places, on whether taxes should be raised. And the point is, there are no faces attached to these decisions. So they go on Sunday and decide without such a high danger that they are taken by charismatic faces or so. Would this also be a way to go?
Yes, I agree with you. Switzerland is a unique country because, firstly, the president and the government are elected directly by the two chambers of parliament. So it's not the people directly who are voting for the president and the government, it's the parliamentarians. However, as you said, we have a strong system of democracy and direct democracy. And usually what happens is parties take positions on issues and then people vote on the issues. And very often they will follow the political line of a party with which they are identified. So there's probably less of an emphasis placed on individuals and much more of an emphasis placed on parties and on positions. Of course, there are people behind the issues which can influence voters again, either for the positive or for the negative. The other interesting thing about Switzerland is that it does not accord a lot of power to the executive. That the president of Switzerland, for example, has much less power than Nicolas Sarkozy or Barack Obama or Angela Merkel. There are a lot more strong institutions here that keep a check and balance on the kind of power that can be exercised. As a consequence, in Switzerland, leaders cannot stick their neck out too much and act too charismatic or too visionary, because it's like a nail that's sticking out that's going to get hammered back down. And Blocher, for example, Christopher Blocher is a case in point. He's the leader of a right-wing party who is quite charismatic but has been severely criticized as well because he does stick out his neck a bit much on some issues.
So you shift the focus now on, in your answer, on the politicians, and that's in fact also a question I had here. No doubt politicians, political parties will also see or read your paper in Science, and I wonder how they may react. I mean, in the US, for instance, we have primaries, and here stakes are high. Millions of adults vote on this. Wouldn't they be well advised to have focus groups in kindergartens where they ask kids, whom should we send in the race? Who should be in our first row? And then have this division of labor. So if this happens to be the best leader in the party, fine, they just send him in the race. If another one is better, more competent, intelligent, you name it, but unfortunately he has not the corresponding face. No? Could this party then maybe send another one up front in the light of the cameras, and someone from the behind is ruling, governing?
Pulling the strings.
Right.
Well, I guess that's what happens most of the time. I suppose that image is what really drives most of what politicians will do. And if they don't pay enough attention to the image, they probably will not win elections. In a way, it's like a manufacturing company. Volvo cars, for example, are designed by engineers who I would hope are very intelligent. I drive one, so I hope that it's a very safe car. However, when I buy that Volvo car, I don't need to speak to an engineer. I speak to a salesperson who is more, focusing on getting the car from the warehouse to customers. So yes, in a way, the salespeople are what politicians are, and perhaps people are pulling the strings behind the party or other special interests. So in some strange way, I think my results are actually going to help democracies, because I guess politicians are going to pay much more attention to faces, and they might well have focus groups with the little children. It won't cost very much. Maybe they might give the little children a few chocolates and they don't have to pay the focus groups as much money as they would adults. However, if all political parties then start focusing so much on faces, what happens is we're going to have very competent looking politicians everywhere. So what's really going to distinguish the good politician from the not so good is probably going to be the intelligence, the rhetoric, and the position on issues. So in some strange way, perhaps by making people get elected mostly on their faces is going to make everyone on an equal playing field, and in the end, voters might focus much less on the faces because everyone's going to be looking, you know, very intelligent and competent, and they're going to focus much more on the issues and on the true competence of the politicians.
What would you recommend to the average voter and the average democracy out there?
Well, what I have to say is very cliched, and in English we have a saying, don't judge a book by its cover. And that's exactly, I think, what voters should think. They shouldn't judge books by their cover. Second thing is, for democracies, I would say, is they should line and cover all their books with the same dust jacket. And by that I mean that they should limit the exposure that they give to individuals. For example, in some countries they put the face of the politicians that are running for a certain position on the ballot. So they should limit that. And last thing is, as much as possible, strengthen institutions and restrict the amount of power that individuals get, because we know that power corrupts.
I hope your study contributed to make the world a better place, get better politicians, better leaders, and this is where we stop this discussion. Thanks, John, for your time and for explaining what you found out. Goodbye.
Thank you, Ulrich, and goodbye.